Chapter 33, October 1979, A Long-Awaited Arrival. The airport in San Francisco was bustling that morning with a familiar buzz of arrivals and departures. Suitcases rolling, voices overlapping, the smell of coffee blending into the faint sense of anticipation. But for us, for the family, the noise faded into a distant hum. We were waiting for Anh Thanh Hưng, finally arrival after months of uncertainty, after 10 days of a frail boat across the Gulf of Thailand, after a life lived in fear and hope in Songkla. He was 22, still young, still so much of a boy in so many ways, yet the trials he had endured had carved him into someone both fragile and remarkably resilient. Standing near the arrival gates, chị Thanh Hoa, Thanh Tam, Thanh Loan and I clutched each other's hands instinctively. We had already survived so much as a family, yet our hearts thumped wildly in anticipation of seeing him walk through those automatic doors. We had waited for this moment for nearly a year. When the doors finally opened, time seemed to bend. People poured through in waves, families, businessmen, tourists, but then he appeared. Anh Hưng frame was taller than I remember from our last sighting in Vietnam. His shoulders were broader, his hair slightly longer, his eyes tired yet glinting with the unmistakable spark of relief and life. Our voice broke at once. We called his name, Hưng, Hưng. He paused, scanning the crowd, and then recognition dawned. He broke into a run, the exhaustion of travel and years of fear momentarily forgotten. We met him halfway, arms wrapping around him with a ferocity that spoke of months of longing and worry. Tears streamed down faces that have endured so much, and laughter mingled with sobs. For a few minutes there was nothing but the warmth of being together, nothing but the sensation of family reunited. Hưng hands trembled as he held ours. "I made it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I'm finally here." "Yes," we say together, "you are here. You are in a free country." Life in Mountain View. After the airport, we returned to the apartment on Richmond Road in Mountain View, the small but familiar space that had become our refuge for siblings. Chị Thanh Hoa, Thanh Loan, Hưng and I share its warmth. Though the apartment was modest, it was a sanctuary, a place where laughter and grief could coexist, where we could slowly rebuild our lives after the storms of exile. And Hưng moved in as though the apartment had been waiting for him all along. The rooms, sparse yet clean, seemed to breathe with new energy. He unpacked his few belongings carefully, a small suitcase, a photograph of mother that had accompanied him from Vietnam, a worn journal where he had recorded his thoughts at sea. Life in Mountain View was challenging. English was still a barrier. Jobs were scarce, and every grocery run, every utility bill, every phone call required careful attention and patience. But the apartment was alive with shared responsibility and care. Each meal prepared together, each evening spent talking or reading the newspaper, each small victory, finding a job, navigating the bus schedule, understanding a letter from government felt monumental because we have endured so much to reach this place. In the other hand, life in San Jose, while we adopted in the small apartment in Mountain View, chị Thanh Tam and Anh Thanh had taken a bold step forward. In San Jose, on a quiet cul-de-sac named Rice Court, they had purchased a beautiful home, large enough for their growing family. It was bright, filled with sunlight streaming through wide windows, and for the first time, they felt like a dream came true, a permanent home. The house was more than a dwelling, it was a symbol of achievement and hope. Anh Thanh had invested in King Supermarket and 7 Trees, the beginnings of the enterprises that would provide stability and support not only for his family, but eventually for all of us. The supermarkets became a lifeline, a place where Vietnamese refugees could find familiar foods, where community could thrive, where families like ours could catch a glimpse of home in a foreign land, share memories and lingering sorrows. In the midst of joy, memories clung like shadows. We talk often of Pulau Bidong, of Songkla, of the 10 days at sea. Anh Hưng spoke sparingly at first. He was chosen carefully. He recounted the fear and the hunger, the sun burning his skin, the waves rising like mountains. His eyes grew distant as he spoke of mother, standing waist deep in water, waving, a figure that was stimulously strong and fragile. Chị Thanh Hoa shared her own memories of Bidong, a crowded huts, the excitement of reunion with chị Thanh Vân before she departed for Canada, the nights when the sea wind whispered stories of the families separated, the fear that one day she might never see her siblings again. We all remember the boat rides, the pirates, the desperate hope that one more day at sea would bring survival. Even the warmth of Mountain View, the past was never far away, but these memories, painful though they were, bound us together. They reminded us for the fragility of life, the value of the family, and the power of endurance. A new beginning, gradually, in Mountain View settled into rhythms. Anh Hưng enrolled into Foothill College, taking engineering courses. At night, he often sat by the window, staring out at the quiet streets, remembering the waves, the heat of the sun on the boat, the image of mother standing in the water waving goodbye. Those memories were heavy, yet they were the very reason he cherished each small comfort in Mountain View. He promised himself that he would put all his efforts into studying and graduating from college, a gratitude to his parents for letting him live and thrive in the free country, the USA. Evenings were a time of connection. We cooked together, shared stories, laughed at small absurdities, and sometimes cried in the quiet dark. Remember those still at sea, those whose paths we had yet to see completed. The apartment on Richmond Road became a place of both refuge and education, a small island of safety in a land of opportunity. Anh Hưng, though young, had matured beyond his years. He often sat quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The boat, the pirates, the endless ocean, these were not just memories of fear. They were lessons in resilience, in patience, in the strength of human spirit. And every time he looked at his siblings, every time he felt the warmth of our small family, he understood the meaning of survival. By the time autumn settled over Mountain View, the four of us have learned to navigate our new life together. Anh Hưng presents were a balm, a reminder that despite the horrors we had endured, we had survived. And across the valley in San Jose, the stability of the Thanh Tam and Anh Thong's home offered hope that the family could flourish, not just survive. The past remained a shadow, but the present was bright. The future, though uncertain, was ours to shape. The journey of the Gulf of Thailand to Mountain View had been treacherous, but it had taught us more than fear. It had taught us endurance, gratitude, and the unshakable bond of family. Songkla reunion and the promise of a new life. And as we settle into our new lives in Mountain View and San Jose, one piece of our family remained out of reach, Anh Tòng. After his perilous journey by boat, marred by the cruel hands of pirates and the uncertainty of open sea, he finally made it to Songkla refugee camp. The camp was crowded, a temporary haven for those who had survived the treacherous crossing of the Gulf of Thailand. The air was thick with a smell of salt, sweat, and the faint tang of cooking fires, and the sounds of dozens of languages and cries of children blended in the constant hum of survival. For Anh Tòng, life in Songkla was both relief and torment. Relief because he had survived the sea, torment because he was isolated. The first days were filled with exhaustion and disbelief. He slept little, ate less, and walked the narrow paths of the camp, observing families reunited, letters exchanged, and small gestures of kindness. And each sight were a reminder of what he had left behind, his parents in Vietnam, his siblings in the US, and the long months of uncertainty still stretching before him. Lost connections, Anh Tòng had come with a heart full of hope that he could contact our family in California. He had memorized what little he knew, the names, the approximate location, the details that could help him reach us, but in the chaos of camp life, he lost the phone numbers, the addresses, and every clue that could guide him. Each day he tried in vain to ask others for help. He scoured bulletin boards, asked volunteers, and listened to whisper of ships that might carry letters or calls, but no information reached him. Time passed slowly. Weeks become months, months become almost a year. Anh Tòng wrote letters he could not send, whispered prayers into the wind, and sometimes sat alone by the water, watching boats depart and imagined the world beyond the horizon. The weight of helplessness pressed upon him, a reminder that freedom without connection could feel like another kind of exile. Yet even in despair, Anh Tòng never gave up. Each morning he woke up with the same resolve to survive, to endure, to find a way to reach his family. It was a resilience forged not only in the perils of the seas, but in the quiet moments of fear and loneliness that few could understand. a helping hand. It was in this darkness a small miracle arrived. An American doctor stationed temporarily in Songkla noticed Anton's persistence and concern. Touched by his story, the doctor offered assistance. Through carefully searching ingenuity, she traced a yellow page directory from California, eventually locating Anton's address on Richmond Avenue, Mountain View. The connection was more than a lifeline. It was the proof that the threats of family could withstand even oceans, pirates, and months of silence. In that moment, he knew he was no longer alone. He knew that the journey, though far from over, had a clear path ahead. Preparing for departure. Once arrangements was made, Anton prepared for a final leg of his long journey. The camp staff guided him to depart Songkla and transfer him to the land where the plan that could carry him to freedom was. Anton's heart was heavy. He thought of the friends he left behind in Songkla, the love the families were still waiting for rescue, and the bitter knowledge of many who had not survived. Yet he also felt a profound gratitude for life, for resilience, and for family who was waiting on the other side of the world. Reunion in the United States. By 1980, Anton finally arrived in California, San Francisco Airport. We had already built our little network of homes. The apartment on Richmond Road with Anh Hưng, Thanh Hoa, Thanh Loan and I, and the rice court home with chị Thanh Tam and Anton. When Anton got to our apartment on Richmond, we rushed toward him. Tears ran freely, laughter and sobs mingled in the symphony of relief and joy. The weight for months of fear and waiting melted in our embrace. At last our family, fractured by oceans and war, was together again. Settling into a free life with Anton's arrival, our lives began to settle into patterns of stability and hope. Anh Hưng adapted quickly to engineering classes, finding work part-time and contribute to the household. Chị Thanh Hoa focused on her work at Time Electronics, while Thanh Loan and I navigated school and daily chores. We share everything, the meals, the responsibilities, the small victories, and even our memories at sea, the camps, the perils we had endured. Meanwhile, San Jose became center of opportunity. Anton's supermarkets, King Supermarket and Seven Trees were more than businesses. They were lifeline for Vietnamese community. They provided employment, a sense of familiarity, and a hub for families scattered across the Bay Area to reconnect. Chị Thanh Tam managed the home with the same care she had always shown, balancing family and work, ensuring that every child felt safe, every adult felt respected, and every visitor felt welcome. The bond of shared survival. In Mountain View, the apartment on Richmond Road became small heaven. Each day brought new challenge, navigating the bus system, dealing with language barriers, apply for social security numbers, finding jobs, and adjusting to culture, both foreign and liberating. Yet these tasks were easier because we faced them together. We often reflected on journey that had brought us here, endless nights at sea, the waves that had threatened to consume us, the pirates who had tried to steal our dignity, the crowded refugee camps, the uncertainty, the fear, the long months of separation. Those memories, though painful, created a bond that nothing else could. We reminded us the preciousness of freedom and the fragility of life. celebrating milestone. We celebrated every milestone, no matter how small. Anh Hưng getting the BS degree in engineering, Thanh Hoa's first job, Anh Tong's first job as a VP at Touche. Each achievement was magnified by the knowledge of what we had endured. Even in the simplest moments, a shared meal, a quiet evening, a laugh over minor mistake was tinged with gratitude and a deep, almost sacred appreciation for being together. The family began to expand in small ways as well. Chị Thanh Loan got married in early 1981 and moved to Florida. Anh Tong bought his first home in San Jose. Reflections on freedom. As moments passed, we began to understand what freedom truly meant. It was not just an absence of fear, the safety from pirates or oppressive regimes. It was the ability to make choices, to plan for the future, to work, to speak, to love without looking over your shoulder. It was the laughter of children in the comfort of shared meal, the quiet nights when we could finally sleep without terror tugging at our minds. But freedom also carried responsibility. We had to learn new systems, new languages, and new social rules. We had to navigate bureaucracy, work tirelessly, and support one another. The lessons of Vietnam, the resourcefulness, patience, and resilience remain vital. They were our guideposts, helping us navigate a new world in the same determination that had kept us alive on the seas in the camps. The strength of the family. By the end of 1980, the family was finally home. 4 siblings in Mountain View, chị Thanh Tam and Anh Thông in San Jose. We were not wealthy by American standards, but we were rich in ways that money could not measure, in resilience, in survival, in love, and in irreplaceable bond of family. We often sat together in the evenings reflecting on the journey. Sometimes we spoke of Vietnam, the rice paddies, the canals, the smell of the sea, the faces of parents we had left behind. Sometimes we spoke of Bidong, Songkla, and the perilous boats, and sometimes we simply sat in silence, aware that we were together, aware that we had survived, aware that we were finally home. Through these reflections, we understood something essential. The past would always be part of us, but it did not define us. We had the freedom to rebuild, to nurture, to love, and to thrive. The sea has tested us, the camps have challenged us, the separation had hurt us, but none of it could destroy the strength of our family. Closing reflection. The arrival of Anh Tong in 1980 marked more than a reunion. It marked a culmination of a journey that had begun years earlier on the shores of Vietnam. It was the moment when survival transformed into life, when fear gave way to hope, and when family, fractured by oceans and circumstances, was finally home. Our story did not end with arrival in America. It was only beginning. There would be challenges ahead, cultural barriers, financial struggles, and emotional scars of our past, but we faced them together. And in that togetherness, we found the true meaning of freedom. Not merely by the absence of danger, but presence of love, support, and ability to shape our lives with our own hand. In Mountain View and San Jose, on the quiet streets with bustling supermarkets, the family thrived. Each day was a testament of endurance to faith and to unbreakable bonds that carry us from the uncertainty of the seas to the promise of a new life. One by one, we made it to the land of freedom. We are finally free. This is the end of chapter 33, to be continued.